0. You wake up and check your phone before fully opening your eyes. There are no new messages, and nothing inside you tightens. You pass a cafe where you once spent hours with someone familiar. Your body remembers the route, but not the ache people describe. You listen as others talk about missing voices, faces, shared routines. You nod because you understand the words, not the sensation. Somewhere along the way, you noticed you grieve differently than most. Not colder, not detached, just quieter inside. People sometimes mistake this silence for emotional absence or avoidance. They assume connection should echo loudly when someone leaves. But here's the twist. What if missing someone isn't the default human response? What if it's shaped by how your mind experiences time itself? Studies suggest emotional intensity naturally decays faster for certain individuals. For them, time doesn't stretch loss, it compresses it. And almost no one talks about people who move forward without longing. 1. Time perception and emotional persistence. People often say you don't miss others because you never cared deeply. That explanation feels simple, comforting, and socially convenient. But it ignores how differently time can be felt internally. You experience emotions like weather, not architecture. They pass through, leave traces, then clear without warning. This is where emotional decay quietly operates in the background. Not as numbness, but as rapid emotional resolution. Temporal emotional distance grows faster for you than for others. Yesterday feels informational, not emotionally adjacent. You remember what happened without reliving how it felt. The moment ends when it ends, not when memory revisits it. This doesn't apply to everyone who seems emotionally steady. Some suppress, some detach defensively. But for you, persistence simply isn't how emotion behaves. And the question lingers, if feelings fade naturally, what does missing even mean? 2. Anticipated loss and emotional regulation. A common belief says you don't miss people because you expect them to leave, that you emotionally prepare for absence from the beginning. There's truth here, but not in the cynical sense people assume. You calibrate emotional expectations before attachment fully forms, not to avoid pain, but to maintain internal balance. Anticipatory coping happens quietly, almost invisibly. You imagine endings without dramatizing them. Effective forecasting guides how much emotional energy you invest. You rarely assume permanence, even in meaningful connections, so absence doesn't shock your nervous system. It arrives already accounted for. This isn't fear minus based for everyone who does it. Sometimes it's learned through consistency, not trauma. You don't brace for loss. You simply don't inflate presence. And that raises an uncomfortable thought. Is longing always proof of love? 3. Self-minus concept without relational dependence. People often believe identity is built through constant relational mirrors. Without others nearby, they feel unfinished or undefined. You don't. Your sense of self remains intact in empty rooms. Silence doesn't threaten your continuity. This reflects a form of self-minus containment rarely named. Your internal narrative doesn't collapse when witnesses disappear. Autonomous self-minus construal shapes how you exist alone. You are someone even when unobserved. Relationships add texture, not structure, to who you are. They enrich without stabilizing your core. This isn't emotional superiority or isolation. It's simply a different psychological architecture. Not everyone who stands alone feels whole. Not everyone who feels whole stands alone. But for you, absence doesn't fracture identity, which invites a deeper question. How much of the self should depend on others? 4. Social attachment and distance management. People often label you as distant, avoidant, or emotionally guarded. They assume closeness must look like constant emotional proximity. But your attachment doesn't disappear. It stabilizes at a different distance. Attachment avoidance is often misunderstood as indifference. For you, it functions more like calibration than withdrawal. You manage emotional space deliberately, not reactively. Closeness exists, but without fusion or urgency. Interpersonal boundaries feel natural, not defensive. You sense when emotional overlap becomes destabilizing, so you step back before imbalance forms, not to protect others, to preserve internal coherence. This pattern doesn't fit every low-minus attachment individual. Some learn it through rupture, others through temperament. In your case, distance isn't a wall. It's a regulated equilibrium, and it leaves one quiet question. Is intimacy measured by proximity or by sustainability? 5. Value system and emotional economy. Many believe missing someone is proof of emotional richness. That longing signals depth, loyalty, or relational investment. You don't organize emotion that way. Your value system prioritizes inner stability over emotional intensity. Not because intensity is wrong, but because it's costly. Emotional cost-benefit analysis happens beneath awareness. You sense when attachment demands exceed emotional return, so you invest selectively, conserving internal resources. Presence matters, but not at any price. Value minus based detachment isn't cold calculation. It's alignment with what keeps you psychologically solvent. Not everyone who misses deeply is emotionally reckless. Not everyone who misses lightly is emotionally efficient. But for you, equilibrium holds higher value than longing, which complicates a familiar assumption. What if missing someone isn't always worth the emotional expense? 6. Memory encoding and meaning without absence. People expect memories to ache when someone is gone. They assume recollection should reopen emotional loops. Yours rarely do. You store people as meaning, not sensation. Facts remain without emotional reverberation. Semantic memory bias shapes how you remember connection. Names, moments, conversations stay intact, but they don't trigger emotional reenactment. The past stays past even when recalled. Meaning internalization allows relationships to complete themselves internally. Nothing is missing, even when someone is absent. This doesn't mean memories lack value. They simply don't demand emotional presence. Not everyone who remembers calmly feels less. Not everyone who aches remembers more deeply. For you, absence doesn't activate memory, and that leaves one lingering tension. If nothing feels missing, was anything lost? 9. Some people feel deeply through longing. Others feel deeply through completion. Culture tends to romanticize ache as emotional authenticity. It teaches that missing is evidence of connection, but that narrative leaves little room for quieter psychologies. Here is the truth that rarely gets named. Not all bonds echo after absence. Your way of relating exists outside dramatic emotional arcs. It favors continuity over rupture. You move forward without erasing what mattered. You remember without reopening wounds. Perhaps this isn't emotional deficiency. Perhaps it's a different relationship with time, self, and meaning. A single truth remains. Not all depth makes noise. And beyond this topic, a wider question emerges. Who are you when emotion no longer defines your humanity? If this reflection stayed with you, consider following this space as a shared intellectual journey